Right. So welcome everybody to our first webinar in relation to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians and obviously the LMC kind of role in this. Just to introduce myself, I'm Charlotte Woods. I'm the operations manager within the LMC, and I'm a Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. And I'm just going to pass you over to my colleague.
Yeah, and hi there, I'm Farine. I'm a GP by profession and the LMC deputy chair, and I'm one of the other guardians at the LMC. We thought we're going to try and make it as interactive as possible and share the information as we go through. So it'll be a bit of a double act between Charlotte and myself. And please feel free to sort of stop us in the middle, ask questions, try and make it as interactive as possible, and we'll go from there.
And you probably kind of noticed that we haven't rehearsed this very well, so please forgive us as we kind of go through this. But in the sense of, obviously, Farine and I are both kind of trained, recognised guardians within the National Guardians Office. And if you kind of go to the National Guardians, we will be displayed within there as kind of accredited guardians. This is a different role to kind of obviously what the champions are, and champions are kind of more those kind of people that kind of support in relation to guardians, but they're completely different in their role.
Yeah. So we were going to talk a little bit about what is speaking up, and why do we have to do it? It's like anything else, isn't it? Really, the whole idea of speaking up is to try and protect patients and help people that are working and make it feel like it's a safe environment, and just make sure that the experience that people are going through within any organization that they're using is a safe and a happy one, really. But I think in order for it to work, rather than it just being a tick box exercise and people just tick in the box, yes, we've got the freedom to speak up guardian, tick box. It's about actually understanding why we're doing it, and what the reason why we're doing it, why we think it will help. And really it's at each level. So it's not, it's everyone's business, isn't it? It's a little bit like safeguarding, I guess. To some extent, it's everybody's business. And so if there are things happening, anybody should feel at any level within any organization that they have the ability to sort of raise concerns, to try and make things better, really. So yeah, I think this is kind of what this is sort of alluding to, the reasons as to why we feel we need to speak up.
And just to kind of echo that kind of point, and obviously the freedom to speak up kind of role in the Guardians has been around for kind of several years now. However, it's kind of a newer kind of thing in the world of kind of general practice, and significantly more around, obviously, as more cases kind of get brought to light, in specifically within the media and likewise. So obviously within the trusts and those kind of things, they're much bigger organisations, so they've been around for a lot longer. And we're just trying to kind of obviously implement that, obviously more within general practice, so it doesn't seem so disfamiliar.
Yeah. So I guess what kind of things would people speak up about? And I guess the slide is fairly self-explanatory. So you're thinking about any concern, anything that's concerning somebody, and actually not always about concerns, but even just about suggestions for improvement, isn't it? So you may have used a bit in a practice and felt actually it was fine, but there was another way of making it better. So that bit about sort of improvement, complaints, whistleblowing, grievances, so that kind of thing. I mean, anything else anybody thinks we might have missed on that list? No, all right, that's fine. We'll carry on.
I think you've stunned them into silence, but I think it's just kind of just moving on to the next slide. The freedom to speak up, the freedom to speak up is not a contractual responsibility. However, it is recognised obviously within CQC, and there will be an expectation that practices obviously comply, which obviously this will probably be an important slide that people want to recognise, and we'll share this post the webinar. But this just kind of runs through obviously what the expectations are from CQC. I won't read it out, but the next slide also gives you where and what those regulations are in relation to CQC and what the expectation is. Do you have anything to add, Farine?
Yeah, no, and I think that's the thing. It's this bit that always sort of flummoxes general practice around sort of what is contractual and what isn't. And so it's all very well we say it's not contractual, but if you don't fulfill it because of CQC, then you're on to a bit of a sticky wicket. So I guess in this case, yes, it's not in the contract, but it is what's expected from you as a practice by CQC, at least having an understanding of the process and the procedures, etc., etc. And hence one of the reasons the LMC decided to sort of pursue trying to sort of have guardians guardians that can help support practices, really. So, yeah. So I think we were going to leave this as a bit of an open slide and just sort of maybe try and bring people in and hear whether you think it's important or you don't think it's important, and just sort of try and make it a little bit more interactive rather than having Charlotte and me speak at you for the next half an hour. Guys, please feel free to come in.
Does anybody have anything that they wish to add? Just questions around why you think freedom to speak up is important, not important, how you feel that it kind of currently happens with your practice. It's just an opportunity to kind of have that kind of open dialogue. And we lost them all on a Friday afternoon.
I think so. Everyone's probably having lunch. It'd be nice to hear from a practice what you guys are doing and what you feel, you know, is relevant in the freedom to speak up, putting people on the spot. But anybody?
Okay. So we'll just kind of help out in the sense of just trying to kind of go through some kind of things of why it's kind of important. And then I think as we've had this kind of discussion, as people practice, in general practice, we always kind of tend to look at the kind of the more kind of the challenging, the negative, and that kind of, which is very important to obviously deliver good patient care, to create a culture that's obviously a good place to work is important. But also we kind of don't recognise the kind of the good things. And one of the things that the LMC recently have done with UHL is to recognise with the awards. And this is something we'll be progressing kind of going forward. And obviously we want to try and create that kind of good culture, positive attitudes amongst the kind of general practice workforce. So I think that's the reason why one of the things we think it's important as well, not just for the bad things or the wrong things, but also for the good things.
Yeah, absolutely. And couldn't echo that more. I think in general practice, we're always kind of being punished or punishing ourselves with all the negative stuff. And it's that bit about how we recognize actually all the good work that happens. And obviously institutions like UHL and LPT already have that and have had so for several years. And it's nice that this year UHL has agreed to have a general practice award as part of their award ceremony. But going forward, that was something as an LMC we were going to look at to try and sort of bring that culture back into general practice and sort of recognize people for all the hard work that they do. So, you know, just because otherwise it's always very, very negative. And I think this was how can people speak up, and there's different ways that people can speak up. So there's the whole sort of confidentially. The key thing around the confidentially, they can call the office and say, look, I'm worried about whatever it is, and I want my name to be kept confidential. But one of the key things that really does need to come out of that is if it was something that involved anything that was safeguarding or anything like that, then that would trump the confidentiality of the person. So if somebody did come to the LMC and told us something that needed you know, immediate action, then at that point, like we say, safeguarding trumps that. So we may have to breach confidentiality. Otherwise, if it is confidential, it remains confidential. If there is no other bits that are otherwise sort of worrying, so you know, if it's a terrorist thing or if it's a safeguarding thing, etc., that would definitely trump that. The other ways are obviously pretty self-evident. So openly, I would come and say, here's my name, and this is what I'm worried about, and feel free, you know, for that to be used internally within the bit. Anonymously is a hard one, and there are ways of which just to try and allow people to speak, and if they're really scared and even don't want to make it confidential but only anonymous, there are ways of sort of contacting the LMC office to be able to leave a message on a phone without leaving your name, etc., behind, so that it's totally anonymous. And then from outside as well. So those are the ways in which people can speak up, really.
I'll cover this one for Ian. So I think it was the LMC originally kind of got involved with the Freedom to Speak Up because we wanted to act as a kind of an independent. We provide a lot of pastoral kind of support for practices anyway, in a kind of a whole range of different kind of manners. But we're not here to kind of replace people within kind of practice. We're here as another point to kind of obviously support that kind of culture in relation to freedom to speak up. So obviously naturally they will kind of encourage practices. The freedom to speak up guardians are not here to kind of solve the matters, but we're here as to try and navigate and obviously support people to be able to have that voice to kind of speak up. As you can see from the diagram below, there's a series of different people that you can speak up to. The LMC has invented this kind of our own policy and a poster, which I know Leanne kind of mentioned on the chat that they display, and we would encourage anybody that kind of uses the LMC to act as their Freedom to Speak Up guardian to display that within their practice, so it's kind of shared amongst team meetings, it's visible to all kind of staff.
And I think one of the other things that I was probably going to add into there, the freedom to speak up thing within general practice is quite hard, especially because we're really small organizations. And so if somebody, say a receptionist wants to say something about something that she's feeling is not right in the practice, she may feel that it's a really hard thing to go up to one of the partners and say something, because obviously that's the direct sort of employment. And so having somebody external to that makes it a little bit easier. Obviously in bigger organizations like UHL, there's lots and lots of people. And so the freedom to speak up office is a completely separate bit from that. So it feels like you're not sort of going right down the same bit that you feel may affect you. So it just allows that opportunity for people to be able to speak up and air concerns if they have any. So obviously these are the channels to go through, but I appreciate that sometimes in general practice that can be quite hard for employees to follow.
So just moving on to kind of obviously what the LMC kind of is offering. The LMC is offering to act as practices freedom to speak up guardian. With that, obviously, you'll get provided with a policy which you can adopt, and also you'll then have access to obviously the freedom to speak up guardians, which is myself and Farine. Obviously, this is encouraged to kind of be shared amongst kind of practices. I think we had over 75 practices that are already kind of signed up as guardians, and we're just doing this talk today to kind of try and familiarise it all with practices.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's kind of what is the role around the freedom to speak up guardian. And I think that's one of the things that is probably worth clarifying. The freedom to speak up guardian is not there to solve the problems, but is really genuinely there to signpost. So it's not like we're an arbitrator or anything like that. If there's issues, we're not going to solve the issue. That's really not our role. Our role is to be able to have people speak up and then able to sort of guide them as to what can be done about it. So it's that whole bit around where people need to go for whatever the thing that's being highlighted, and how we can actually help support that. And sometimes obviously we'll get flummoxed by some of the things that will come to us, and just to reassure everyone, there are sort of regional networks that we are involved in. We have monthly meetings where obviously all anonymized cases can be discussed about things that are happening, what people have done to help that. Locally, we're part of a local group as well. So this is the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians in the ICB and other organizations that we have locally. And there's some practices and federations that already have Freedom to Speak Up Guardians as well, and they're part of that network as well. So there's a good sort of network around us to sort of, discuss cases and stuff. And obviously we can always go back to the National Guardian Office where we submit sort of the things that are happening, obviously anonymized, and the learning that comes through from that. So it is quite interesting. And when you go to some of the regional meetings, it's not just obviously the medical part of the NHS, but there's the dentist, et cetera, and it's actually quite interesting. Yeah. So that's pretty good. Gaelish has a question. He's like, how is this different? If I've missed this bit, how different is the Freedom to Speak Up guardian at LMC to transferring care safely on PALS? So it's very different, Garish. This is the transferring care safely is your transferring care safely bit is documentation around you sort of letting UHL know around things that you felt have gone wrong, or the PALS, which is the patient advisory helpline, is again completely different. The Freedom to Speak Up bit is around what what individuals working within that organization feel that they need to raise. So these are things like whistleblowing things, or if somebody feels that something's not going right in the practice and they're feeling, say, bullied or victimized or whatever. So the HR type issues is that kind of thing. So it's very different. The Freedom to Speak Up is that pretty much, and I think the confusion comes in around the whistleblowing and Freedom to Speak Up, because they're actually quite similar, but it's that bit around anything that you're particularly worried about within your own organization that you feel that you need to raise will come up to the Freedom to Speak Up. Charlotte, I don't know if you have anything else to add on to that.
No, I think you kind of articulated that. It's quite separate, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
the Freedom to Speak Up is kind of internally within your kind of your staff and your culture within your kind of organization. the PALS is kind of a separate in relation to the
Yeah.
care from your kind of direct patient care with your kind of patients.
Yeah. So I think this kind of covers it a little bit more. So it's that additional channel for speaking up. So obviously, if people feel that they can take things internally. So again, I'm using the receptionist example here, but receptionist may feel that she can go up and he or she can go up and speak to the line manager, or they may feel actually I feel too scared to do that. So in that case, then they actually have another opportunity to be able to come out and speak outside. I mean, there's no reason, even according to CQC, that the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian couldn't be somebody in the practice. But I think practices have felt that it's quite a hard thing to be able to manage that in terms of sort of conflict of interest, and hence that's the reason the LMC sort of thought that we would try and support practices with that, because we're seen externally from that. So it's that bit about allowing people the comfort that it feels confidential and feels away from inside the organization. So it's about that bit around the confidentiality. And like I said earlier, confidentiality is upmost, but if there's anything that sort of trumps that is the sort of safeguarding things. But say there's nothing like that, then it's about offering the next steps. We won't sort the problem out because that's not our role, but our role is how do we actually help you take that further and help sort that out. So the things that we can do is sort of help you sort of work through how you may be able to speak up in your own organization, or actually come with you if you need to attend a meeting or anything like that, and then just working through that. So there's the whole thing around the feedback loop as well. So yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything else to add to that, Charlotte. No,
and I think as general practice, we know, like, from across the board, the kind of the figures in relation to cases isn't kind of astronomical in comparison to kind of trusts and other kind of community kind of organizations, because general practice is organizations in their own right, and similar to kind of trusts are, but obviously general practice is more as a kind of a community anyway, but sometimes there's not always that opportunity to kind of have that open kind of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if anybody here recognizes themselves as a champion. Not sure if you want to kind of wave your hand if you are. It's not something that we kind of currently kind of embedded within LLR or LMC about kind of working champions and guardians and that kind of thing, where people kind of do become champions or guardians, and we're here to kind of obviously support kind of both, and how you kind of disseminate that kind of information to kind of within your kind of staff and your wider kind of support.
Yeah, and I guess this is a little bit around what the National Guardian Office does. So that's kind of like the overarching bit that sits above all the guardians, and it's that bit around having that, being able to collate information from all across the country, looking at any specific themes, any learning that is shared, all the sort of training and that kind of stuff. And like I say, the monthly meetings that happen where, guardians all across the country come together and are able to discuss cases and that kind of thing as well, and helping that kind of provide a link, especially within the regions, so that guardians don't feel that they're working in silos. There's a little bit more of that kind of group networking, if that makes sense. Pretty much
and as obviously this kind of develops in relation, gets more embedded within what we're offering, we hopefully be able to kind of share kind of different kind of themes, or what kind of learnings are kind of come for it to kind of support other practices as they come across similar in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this was just a bit about kind of obviously where about the Guardians. So the Guardian's office is kind of a huge kind of network, and obviously there's a lots of kind of Guardians across the kind of the country, particularly kind of around the trusts, and now kind of being embedded within kind of general practice. Do you want to do this one for me?
Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit old data, but it was just, this is based on the 21-22 data. There'll be stuff that will come through for 23-24, but it was just sort of talking about all the different bits that have happened. And I think one of the interesting things is, like Charlotte said at the beginning, the Guardian stuff has been there for several years, but actually notably the cases have sort of, there's been less people coming forward, which is really interesting. And especially after I'm sure everyone's kind of heard about the Lucy Lethby case. So it's quite interesting because that's really been published a lot more, hasn't it? So I mean, this is self-explanatory. We'll be sharing the slides anyway, but the amounts of cases reported had decreased, but the patient quality safety bit from the cases that were reported had increased, as had sort of the bullying and harassment. So yeah, so it's interesting. So from percentage wise, things have increased, but actually overall people reporting has decreased, which is interesting.
And that kind of brings us to our end slide. Every time I do something with Farine, we go through it at like 400 miles an hour, don't we, Farine? And like, it was a case of like, I tried to give strict instructions to go slower, and we still gone through it very, very fast. But I think we were kind of, basically the way that, obviously, if anybody wants to speak to us Guardians, there's obviously the contact details there, but also we're available kind of obviously to speak to kind of directly as well. You don't have to kind of give names and that kind of thing. We do have a kind of a policy, a poster, which people feel that they can display within kind of practices. And I think that was just kind of the end of our presentation as a formal kind of presentation. But I think it's just a kind of an opportunity to see where kind of practices are. Obviously, if anybody has any questions, we're here.
We've got stunned silence.
They're probably all gone. They're probably all gone on a Friday afternoon. No, I'm joking.
So I was just curious about Leanne. You sort of said you've put the stuff on the staff notice boards, etc., etc. Have you made that part of an induction program as well, or is it just stuff that's disseminated in the staff room, or how have you kind of embedded that into practice? Sorry, Leanne, I'm putting you on the spot. Apologies.
Not at all. No, I just want to make sure you can hear me. Can you
Yes,
hear me?
yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Hi, no problem. Well, I've only been in role for the last 14 months now, and the LMC sent some information. I think it was attached to an email back in 23. Yeah. So what we did is I tried to establish what was already in place at this practice. We already have a champion. One of our nurses, Hayley, she's also on the call. Yes. She's already our champion and she already dealt with the freedom to speak up. But your policy and your posters gave a bit more clarity as to actually what it involves, and followed with this presentation, it's starting to make more sense. At present, we haven't had anyone that I believe, Hayley's not led me to believe that we've had anybody that's needed the service as of yet, but the staff have been made aware, and on our notice board there are visible posters, so they are aware it is a service, but as of yet it's not been used.
Thank you for that, Leanne. And that's really useful, isn't it? Because it's one of those things. I mean, we can have policies and stuff, but if we haven't embedded them in practice, people aren't aware about what it's about. And it's a hard one. I think the freedom to speak up. I remember when I was doing the training, I think between Shah and myself, like, what's the difference between this and the whistleblowing? And you know, it's those nuances that can get quite confusing. And it's looking at the avenues of what kind of things come. And I think one of the things around the Guardian stuff is you can raise anything you want to raise, and that's the beauty of it. There's nothing wrong that you're raising, if that makes sense, because really at the end of the day, the freedom to speak up Guardians don't solve the issues as such. It's about signposting and having that avenue for people to be able to speak. So that's really interesting. And I think, go on, sorry.
And I think it's a good news that you don't have people kind of coming to you. We don't want to kind of have, it means that you're kind of creating a culture that kind of obviously, hopefully things are kind of being addressed, and it's absolutely all fine. It's just kind of recognizing that this is something that's available.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Is that bit about it's an open culture already, so that's absolutely fine, and this is just an extra bit of avenue for people to be able to speak. Yeah.
They're going to kill me, but I'm going to pick on a couple of people. So Linda Smith, how's it going within your kind of practice? Diane? I've scared them all into silence. Trust me, it's a lot worse doing it's a lot worse doing the presentation than on that side.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can, yeah.
Yes.
We've not had anything come up with any conflicts yet or anything like that. I'm the Freedom to Speak Up officer here, but we've not had anything. But I'd be interested in the posters and things, because I think, like you said, that does more clarity on it.
Yeah,
we've got nothing really displayed as such, because that'd be, that more, like you said, gives it more clarity, doesn't it? That people can go to someone.
And obviously having the policy as well.
Kind
of the evidence, and obviously if CQC kind of asks for it, you will obviously have it then.
Yeah.
I can send it to you, Diane, if you don't have it.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, we're more than happy to share posters to be able to put up, because that's a visual reminder for people. And then obviously we've got the policy that we're happy to share, and you would just personalize that to your to your surgery, because that's for CQC, isn't it? But you're allowed to outsource that bit, so that's fine as well. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think post obviously today's webinar, hopefully our technical ability will be allow us to kind of share this webinar, but also kind of we'll share the poster and the policy again for people's records.
Was there any worries about the freedom to speak up? Do practices feel that it's something worrying, or is everybody happy that it's kind of like done in a positive manner to try and help staff? Philippa?
You're on mute, Philippa.
Sorry, I finished my lunch now, I can speak. Yeah, so I don't think we're worried about it at all. I think it is a positive thing for all staff, anybody in any organisation. If you have got concerns and for whatever reason you don't feel you're able to raise it internally, or you don't feel it's being handled when you have raised it internally, then to have an independent body to go to other than just CQC or somebody, I mean, that is positive. And I think from our point of view, although we're a big practice, we were really grateful to be able to sign up to the LMC offer, because it does give that objectivity and independent perspective. Obviously we encourage people, like you say in your slides, go and speak to your line manager, or if it's your line manager that you're worried about, go and speak to a senior member of the practice. But if you can't do that, then having that other option available is just really positive. I think it creates a healthy environment. We have talked about it in our staff meetings and PLT. We've got it on our information governance posters that we've got up with all the DPO and stuff. We've got LMC, and we talk about it when we do our information governance things. So we do talk about it. Whether anybody phones you or not, we don't know, and whether people feel they could do that. But I think even for staff sort of knowing, there's two people, very approachable, you can be anonymous. I think having the three of us from our practice on the call today, I think having listened to what you've said, I think we can do another update, say, we've been to a session, we've heard the actual guardians themselves speak, they're very supportive, encouraging, and make it maybe feel okay for people. We can pass on that sort of vibe that we've got from you and Charlotte today. We can pass that on when we present to our staff as well.
Yeah, no, and that's really positive, Philippa. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? It's that whole bit about being able to foster a really safe, happy work environment, hopefully, where people feel that. And then, I mean, it's a good thing if people are not really having to go outside. That means things are already working really well in the practice, and and it's that sometimes when people are just a little bit worried. And I think, like I say, the reason Charlotte and myself decided we'd try and help out a little bit was you can understand in a practice environment, people may feel a little bit reticent because, it's your boss who's you may be worried about or whatever, and it's very close close-knit as opposed to in a big organization like UHL, where you just maybe a little person in a huge organization, isn't it? So it's a different kind of feeling. So no, but that's really positive. Thank you.
And we are certainly not trying to make an industry out of obviously the freedom to speak up kind of role. It's already kind of embedded. We're just trying to kind of familiarize kind of practices with it. So if we don't have any kind of cases, or we have minimal cases over the next 12 months, then that's great. That I will think that's a kind of a positive. But it's just kind of making sure that obviously people are aware that obviously this is a service that's available to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Smashing. I think people want the posters and the policies back, so we'll send those back out again.
We'll send it out, and I think we'll probably kind of include it within our kind of future comms, just to kind of share it again.
Yeah, for sure. Good. I think if there's no more questions or no more things to raise, we can give everybody half an hour back of their life. It's great. Thank you all.